Steel Vengeance just might be one of the most overrated coasters ever, and in my opinion, I think this mainly because it's at Cedar Point. People feel the need to praise it so much, and honestly, even though it might be at one of the best parks ever for roller coasters, that doesn't mean Steel Vengeance is the greatest coaster ever. So in this video, I'm gonna explain all the reasons why I believe Steel Vengeance is the most overrated coaster I've ever ridden. Let's get started. For one, the ride's manufacturer, RMC, or Rocky Mountain Construction, has improved so much over the past 5 years when it comes to just coaster design in general. Like when comparing it to Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa, which literally broke many of Steel Vengeance's records, including height, speed, and steepness, Iron Gwazi just outright destroys Steel Vengeance in terms of being a much more intense and thrilling ride. Because one, the drop is surprisingly better. Even though it's only 1 foot taller and only 1 degree steeper, the drop just feels so much different. And you can definitely feel that 1 degree in steepness. It's honestly crazy because like with Steel Vengeance's drop, in the back row, you get all the same forces. But it's just with Iron Gwazi's drop, it's so much stronger. And that can generally be said about most similar elements on Steel Vengeance versus Iron Gwazi. Because the next element, the outer bank on Iron Gwazi, is so much better than the outer bank on Steel Vengeance. Like, people praise the outer bank on Steel Vengeance like it's the best element of any coaster they've ever ridden. And to me, the outer bank on Steel Vengeance, it's good, but RMC has just perfected the outer bank so much with Iron Gwazi, because you get much more sustained and powerful ejector airtime. And as for the inversions on Steel Vengeance, they are just so much weaker, because like the inversions on Steel Vengeance don't really provide a crazy amount of forces. I mean, they do provide some good laterals, but they don't really provide any airtime or nothing. While the inversions on Iron Gwazi, mainly that death roll, you're out of your seat the whole way down. I mean, that inversion right there is seriously one of the best inversions ever. And even, in my opinion, Iron Gwazi's stall is way better than the stall on Steel Vengeance because you're hanging upside down for longer, and sure, it's not the best stall ever or nothing. I've definitely experienced better, but Iron Gwazi's inversions are just so much better than Steel Vengeance. And personally for me, with Steel Vengeance, one of my biggest nitpicks is just that, sure, it has like the most airtime of any coaster in the world at 27 seconds, but in my opinion, that airtime just isn't good. Because one, it's very quick pops most of the time. I mean, you do have some very sustained moments in the first half, like that first airtime hill, the outer bank, the step up into the first inversion, and the step up into the mid-course brake run all provide some great airtime. And also the drop into the second half after that mid-course provides some good airtime. But other than that, most of that airtime, especially in the second half, is some very quick pops. And personally, I just find it uncomfortable because of the very quick moments that you have on Steel Vengeance. You're constantly getting slammed laterally and ejected out of your seat at the same time, which sounds great. But because with Steel Vengeance, you're constantly in and out of your seat, because of that whole thing, it's just not really comfortable. While with Iron Gwazi, the airtime hills are much more sustained, and like every airtime hill feels like it matters on that ride. Well, in my opinion, what Alan Schulke should have done with Steel Vengeance, instead of focusing on giving it the most airtime of any coaster, take out like half of those airtime hills in the second half and replace them with more sustained camelbacks. Then the airtime on Steel Vengeance will be so much better. Also, Iron Gwazi is just so much faster paced than Steel Vengeance. Like, I'm not exactly sure the reason why, but I just find it interesting because both coasters have like the same track, same trains. I mean, the reason why, this is just me speculating, but it might be because the rides are running different sets of wheels. Also, it might be because Florida's climate is obviously way hotter than Ohio's, But even despite that, it can get pretty hot in Ohio in the summers. So I'm not entirely sure why Iron Gwazi just runs like freaking hell on earth compared to Steel Vengeance. But I think the reason probably either comes down to just it running different wheels compared to Iron Gwazi, or just the climates of both states. And in my opinion, Steel Vengeance falters the most when you compare it to literally its next door neighbor in Maverick. Like, Maverick literally destroys Steel Vengeance in every way possible. Even though Maverick is a launch coaster built by Intamin, a completely different company, like, both rides share very similar forces, and Maverick's forces are just so much dang stronger. Like, it's literally no comparison. Like, for example, Maverick's drop, even though it's only 105 feet, it goes beyond vertical, and because you have some speed going into it, you get absolutely yonked out of your seat, which you don't get the same experience on Steel Vengeance's drop, by far, even though it's like twice as big. And also, I know Maverick was built for fast transitions while Steel Vengeance wasn't built for fast transitions, but I will admit, Maverick's fast transitions are really wild, and though Steel Vengeance wasn't built for crazy wild laterals, still, Maverick is just a much more wild ride, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for Steel Vengeance. It's just different types of rides. But when you compare both the ride's airtime moments, even though I do hate Maverick's over-the-shoulder restraints and the thick bar that goes across your lap, Maverick's airtime, despite its restraints, is still way stronger than any of Steel Vengeance's airtime. And I'm not exaggerating by that. For example, on that first main airtime hill after the switchbacks, you just go flying out of your seat, and it's not like crazy sustained or nothing, but you really feel that crazy airtime. And that airtime extends to other moments throughout the ride, like for example in the second half on those Stangle dives, you get some crazy wild airtime and laterals simultaneously, which, I mean, I know Steel Vengeance wasn't designed to do that, but just the difference in airtime alone is just staggering. And honestly, that's the main reason why I prefer Maverick over Steel Vengeance, is just because the airtime on Maverick is just so much stronger. And plus, in my opinion, because Steel Vengeance has larger overall elements, even though it goes faster than Maverick, because Maverick stays low to the ground, you feel that 70 miles per hour much more than you do on Steel Vengeance, and it generally just feels like the much faster paced ride. So overall, I just think Maverick destroys Steel Vengeance in every way, and honestly, Steel Vengeance, it's still a very good ride, but I just don't think it's nearly as good as many people say. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my video on why Cedar Point is the most overrated park in the world, and peace.